Thank you. Yeah, technical issues and my earrings. I love them so much. I don't know why I have to remove them, but okay. Lesson for another day. So my name is Toluwanimi Ajewole, and I'm from Nigeria, and I currently live in Berlin. I work with N26, as Tejas has let out already. And today I'll be speaking about Oh No, I Am Stuck. It's a guide to detangling a complex code base. Have you all been there where everything Tejas said? I don't think I could have provided a better introduction into my talk than Tejas did, where like so many things are entangled, you don't know where to start from, or maybe you just know like enough to get started, but you don't know what you're doing. And please let me know I'm not alone in this. Thank you. Also, I have been warned that after lunch is a bad time to deliver your talk. So I want you all to promise me, I am looking at your faces. Promise me you'll give me the best energy. Thank you. All right. So a little about myself. As I've said, I'm from Nigeria, and for my day job, I work with N26. And at night, I typically sleep. So, and when I'm not working, you can find me working out, or I'm taking a lengthy work. Send me your favorite podcast. I love listening to podcasts. I love traveling or daydreaming about traveling, so you will find that this talk is littered with a lot of traveling innuendos. Now, what's my motivation for delivering this talk? Exactly 3 years ago today, and it's not a mere coincidence that I traveled all the way from Nigeria to Berlin with these three big red suitcases and a black box of dried food, which I did not use. Maybe somebody should have told me I needed more than food to survive complexities, but yes, I brought a lot of food. So I moved from Nigeria to Berlin to start working with N26, and I was going to start with a team that did not have a web engineer for a bit. Also, I was going to be onboarded into this code base that it's a monorepo. As Tejas has said, it's a monorepo consisting of 3 other like huge code bases. Get that? And get this. I was coming from a Vue.js background, and I had to start writing React at production level. I clarified it during my interview, so don't think I lied during my interview about knowing how to code in React. But so I was onboarding into the monorepo. I was also learning React at a production level. So you can imagine how intimidating I found it to have to do all of this, right? But luckily, I was surrounded with fantastic colleagues. We were very happy to answer my questions. But you know, you get to like a point. Around that 6 months, you start feeling like, what am I actually doing here? Do I actually understand what I'm doing? You have already committed PRs, but you need to take your understanding to another level, right? So that's my motivation today, where you feel like, yes, I know just enough to get started, but I want to understand deeper. So what should you expect from this? Just like I've said, getting deeper into the code base, and imagine if your code base is a destination. I want you to go from being a tourist in your code base to being a local, like travel like a local, you know? So let's go into it. What's the outline? So I'll be talking about before the dive, which is what are the foundational elements we should put in place before we even say we want to get deeper. And then up next, I'll be going into the meat of the talk, which is applying the art of deconstruction. And I'll quickly get into crystallizing your knowledge. And who does not like a bonus? Obviously, no one. So there will be a bonus session on how do you structure your code base for clarity, in case some of you are already like the owners of the code base, or you're tech lead, you're an engineering manager. That's what that is for. So let's get into it before the dive. This section will be majorly for new joiners. I know that our job space right now isn't it, but if you're a new joiner, Congratulations. Wow, no new joiner. Okay, yeah, so if you're a new joiner or you are inheriting a new code base at work, this section is for you. So we just want to quickly establish what should we even have as our foundation. And the first thing you want to do when you're getting familiar with the terrain, imagine you're traveling to a new place, right? The first thing you want to do is asking for recommendations. That could be a friend, that could be Google with 3941. I don't know why it's 39, I don't know why they are odd numbers, but you know, this listicles that will give you 39 things to do in Budapest. You know, so yeah, you want to ask for a local guide. You want to ask for their recommendation. What should you be digging into when you are in the code base, right? What should you do? You want to know exactly how to deliver the ticket you want to deliver without wasting too much time, right? And then up next, we'll be leaning into existing documentation. So hopefully that exists, right? As a person who works on a complex code base, I also understand how complex it is to manage the documentation and keep it up to date. In fact, having a bad documentation is as bad as not having a documentation in the first place, having an outdated documentation. So, but hopefully you can lean into the documentation to learn about the coding standards, what are the entry points. These things don't usually change in a complex system, right? Then the third will be, please don't break production. But it will be break the code anyways, right? So you have already gotten to all of these levels where you have sought a local guide, you have leaned on existing documentation, and maybe you have been breaking production, right? No judgment here, but hopefully there are tests in place and we are not actually breaking production. I found this meme, or sorry, this video on TikTok, and I felt, oh my God, I felt so seen. Please, I need people to identify with me. Are there people here who are directionally challenged? Like, thank you. I'm not alone. Oh my God, this is me using Google Maps. I'm like, literally just the day before yesterday when I just got into Budapest, I was like, oh my God, yeah, I am not lying on my slides. This is just really me. And I don't know if we feel that way sometimes with navigating a code base where, yes, you always need to have some sort of guide. Yes, you're leaning on existing documentation. Google Maps being the guide here. You have Google Maps, yet, like, you have to recalibrate with Google Maps, you know? But you get to that point where you're like, even if I do not know the routes in a new destination, I should know the routes in my own house. Like, I cannot be using Google Maps and be going, this is my environment, these are the routes around my house. That should not be happening, right? And that's what we want to address right now. Let's go into the deep. Yes, so this is going to focus on what is the level of internalization that we have to do as developers? How do we get to the point where we internalize the components of a complex code base? You know, you're already done train tables, and you're already done like looking at all of the processes it took to get deeper. Now let's get into it. What are the diving gears that we have? We want to dive, don't we? We want to dive. Yes, thank you. All right, so what are the diving gears that you need? This is going to sound very, very cheesy and maybe not so technical, but a very big trust in yourself, right? Because you've been here before. This is not the first time you're traveling. This is not the first time you are packing your bag to go to visit a destination. On the right side, left side. I mean, I'm directionally challenged. I honestly don't know. Yeah, but on this part, we can see these photos of TV towers. We have one in Berlin, there's one in Hamburg, Frankfurt, Stuttgart. So these are very similar structures, right? And the point here is that one of the ways to gain the trust we have in ourselves is to lean on familiar landmarks, right? We have been here before. So for example, if I went to Hamburg and somebody told me, you need to stop at the TV tower, I'm not going to be confused because we also have a TV tower in Berlin. So I know what a TV tower looks like, right? And I think it was when Dara was delivering our talk on TypeScript. I don't know if I mentioned the name right, but the talk on TypeScript, it was talking about extend. And in that moment, I remember how in SAS we had extend. Nobody uses SAS these days, but yes, back then with SAS, right, there was this extend method in SAS. And I was like, wait, it's actually doing the same thing. And it really just clicked in that moment that familiar knowledge is always something to lean into, right? And yes, you have solved the problem before and you can do it again and again. And even on that note as well, speaking of having to write React at production level, one thing that helped me as someone who was writing Vue.js before was I read this article that was on Vue.js, React for Vue.js developers, right? And it was kind of like a one-to-one comparison between the methods and the functions in Vue.js, right? And that helped me, at the very least, to get started, and it gave me a mental model to think about how to approach React, right? And the second thing on our diving gear will be master your tools, because you don't want to eat soup with a fork. It's just going to be really bad, right? This is not a place where we want to hyper focus on a particular tool, a particular language. No, it always has to be this. It always has to be React. It always has to be Angular. Okay, nobody is sorry, no. Okay, yes, it always has to be this or that, right? But it is more about whatever it is that you have chosen to work with. Make sure you know it properly, right? Again, the TypeScript talk was a real eye-opener in that regard, right? So, because truth be told, we're in a battle here with understanding complex code bases, and whatever tools you are using to go into war, you better know how to wield it properly, right? So that's the point of this. Now, I'll take a pause. Let's just go over what we have discussed so far. I started with, before you go into the dive, which is what are the foundational structures we need to set in place before we get into a complex code base, asking questions from local guides, reading the documentation, including the test, please, and shipping the changes anyway. Then we went into the deep, and we are currently in the deep, and so far I have addressed the diving gears that you are using to get into the deep, and your motivation. Your motivation being you do not want to be a tourist in your own code base. Let's do this. Are we ready? Are we ready? Okay. Thinking in Systems. I don't know if anyone has read the book Thinking in Systems by Donella. Sorry, for 1 minute I forgot the name. So it defines a system as an interconnected system, an interconnected set of elements that is coherently organized in a way that achieves something. And I believe that a code base is also just that, honestly. There is the system. That's maybe your product, right? And a code base is this system that is made up of functions, of variables, bigger functions, bigger modules, bigger components, serving a purpose which might be for your enjoyment. Maybe you just really love writing code. It could also be to serve another product or another code base, and maybe for stakeholder value, you know. And yes, let's go into the art of deconstruction. So I learned this word sometime in 2021 with respect to unraveling our belief systems. And I think that here it's a fancy word for reverse engineering your code base, right? And the idea of deconstruction is to identify and map out. Identify and map out. Don't just identify, actually map it out, right? Identifying and mapping out the moving parts of the system and what connects each of them, so their interconnectedness, right? You want to do that, and then you want to tear it apart. Identify, map, and tear it apart, taking one module after the other to understand it. And how do we identify the moving parts of the system, right? Because I believe that it could be it's daunting, no doubt, right? When you have to identify all the moving parts of a complex system. So let's get into how you can actually do this identification, right? So step one on mapping out the moving parts is that collaborate with your colleagues. I cannot overemphasize this, right? I work with fantastic people, and I don't think that any sort of understanding the complexity of our code base can be done without people. So collaborate with your colleagues. The second thing, maybe you don't have colleagues or your colleagues don't like you, I don't know. You can also leverage tools such as AppMap, which has AI capabilities, everything AI, right, to generate dependency graphs. And I am going to demo in a very short bit how to use AppMap here. And the third thing that you can also do to map out the moving parts is as far as that your eyes can see. So there's a chance that your company also doesn't allow you to use AI tools. So I'm so sorry to you. But yeah, so as far as your eyes can see, go through the UI, go through the code base. You already understand like the structure of the code base at this point. So you want to like map it out going through the UI and the folder structure. Is anyone tired here? No, you're not tired. Guess what? It's demo time. Who doesn't like demos? All right. So we'll be getting into a short demo where I'll demonstrate how I used the art of deconstruction, right? The point being a top-to-down strategy of detangling your complex code base. And for this purpose, I used an open source code base, which I am not affiliated with in any way, but I was just looking for something really complex that I could use to demonstrate it. It's StrapEye, and it's an open source headless CMS built with TypeScript. So let's start out with mapping out the big picture view of the code base. Like I said, I mean, this is an open source. I do not have colleagues to collaborate with, but what I did here with mapping out the big picture of StrapEye was to look at the UI. And one thing I have to also mention here is to divide this deconstruction into chunks, right? You cannot do everything all at once. That's just literally impossible. So what I have focused on for StrapEye is the admin platform. So they have like the user-facing part and the admin. So I have focused on, okay, I want to understand the admin of StrapEye, right? So this is the short UI overview, and on the other side is the file structure. So with a combination of this, and yeah, the time will not be enough to show you how many hours I spent going through the UI to the folder structure, but I came up with this. And the idea is to just give you a glimpse into what should be the outcome of mapping out a big picture, right? So you want to see what is the entry point, and we can see from this diagram that the app.tsx is the entry point, right? We can also see the pages, such as the settings, the home page, and the admin page. We also can see that on the further right that there is a utility component for creating the routes, and another component called guided tour. So I would not be going into each of this, but that's the idea of identifying the moving parts. There is a part that is responsible for rendering the route. There is a part that is just the entry point. There's a part that is responsible for authentication, right? There is a part that is responsible for providing context. So if you are working in a complex code base, you want to please work with your colleagues to do this type of thing. If this was my company code base, I would be getting this peer reviewed, right? And in fact, I probably will start with collaborating with them in the first place. So I recommend it as the best way to get a high-level picture, right? So on the idea of deconstruction, right? So we have mapped out the big picture. Up next, I want to understand the guided tour, which is under the home page. And I'll be using the app map. Remember, I mentioned the app map. App map is a tool. It's an architectural tool, and it also has a VS Code plugin, which provides visualization, and it has this AI tool called Navi. So I'll be using that to show you how I was able to generate sequence diagrams and also understand the functions that are running inside the guided tour page. Okay. All right, so this is the point where demos refuse to work. Okay. Yeah, so up here we can see that I am running the appmap command, which is basically, I'll also attach a link to their documentation, by the way. So you just run the command against the test command of the app you're running. You could also run it against the actual command that you used to run the application, but I chose to use the test here because they had very comprehensive end-to-end tests, right? And this is the admin platform. This over here is the guided tour component, and I would like to see, is there a state manager? How are they rendering the list items? This is something I would like to understand under the guided tour, right? And by now, AppMap has generated some data for us, right? So it basically works with the runtime to understand what are the functions that are being called at runtime, and I am doing this with a test. So the results of AppMap are stored under the TMP directory, and I'll go down to the guided tour homepage to see what are the renderings I have here. Yes, and under here we can see that there are some diagrams that have been generated already. Okay, this is turning around is confusing. And I can already see that there is a set step state, so meaning that there is a state management. So you can see at this point, I don't need to know exactly how everything works. This step is about identifying what is working, right? What are the elements that are controlling how this component works under the hood, right? And what is even more important is that with AppMap, I can see the list of functions that are being called in this component, right? And I see that there is a common function being called, and there is a provider, there is a context somewhere, and that gives me an idea of what to understand for the guided tour. So that part is, this is the part about, I want to move along. So this is basically the part of identifying the modules that are contained in a bigger module, right? So how do you fully understand the self-contained pieces because we have gotten to the lowest level of our deconstruction at this point, you know. So, and at this point, there is not so much magic that is left than actually reading the code, reading your source code, right? And some of the other strategies I would recommend here is to understand the whys, right? By reading the product documentation, see your code is delivering value. If you're working within like a product company, a service delivery company, right, your code is to deliver value. So you want to understand the whys. Why does this code exist? Then you also want to go into old PRs to understand the whys and read and run tests to understand better. Then get your hands dirty once again. You want to read the source code and rewrite it. Do not break tests, please. And yes, now that we have gotten the high-level overview, right, we can see now that I have gone from the admin system into some of the components or some of the modules that are contained in the admin system. So we have identified the routes, we have identified guided tour settings and some other modules. And with AppMap, right, or whichever of the strategies you choose to adopt, right, I have seen what is happening under the guided tour provider, and these are the functions that it is calling, right? And the last thing I would mention here is to write the story of the module in whatever way you want to write it. Maybe you want to write it just like literal text, or you want to represent it in a sequence diagram or UML, whatever it is that you want to do, a flow chart. Please just represent the story. What exactly is the guided tour doing here, right? And here is a sequence diagram that I generated alongside the functions that we have seen to represent the story of the guided tour homepage. Now, that is basically the art of deconstruction, right? Now we could do this for guided tour homepage, we could do this for the admin, we could do this for settings, and we would have been able to drill down from the admin down to the guided tour, down to all of this by taking them apart and understanding like their sub-modules and the functions that are underlying each of these individual modules, right? And finally, on the art of deconstruction, or following the art of this construction, is to crystallize your knowledge. The point of getting all of this is to actually internalize them, right? So one of the ways that you can even further internalize your knowledge is to write, document it, because with documentation, you have clarity to your thoughts. Documentation brings a level of clarity to your thoughts that by just like doing whatever it is that you want to do, you would not have that. So it's some sort of guidebook, and even better, you make the lives of other people better, you know. So, and then share, because sharing is caring. Host knowledge sharing sessions within your company. What's the worst that can happen? You will get actionable feedback that deepens your learning. Then my bonus section. So for teams and engineering leaders here who have already like owned their code base, I want to say all of this. Maintain clear module separation, use consistent naming conventions. One thing I also wanted to mention is I don't know if you're an engineering manager here, is to have onboarding bodies for new joiners. That is very, very important, right? So, yes. Highlight of my talk here, we went, before the dive, establishing foundational structures, into the deep, crystallizing your knowledge. And if you don't take anything away from here, please remember crystallizing your knowledge. Whatever is it that you have gained already, even if you feel like you don't understand the full complexity of your code base, please, that's which you know, document it and share it, and you are going to get better for it, right? And we have also talked about the bonus, right? So look at you, traveling like a tourist. So that brings me to the end of my talk. And I hope that with this few points of mine, you have been able to gain some insight into detangling a complex code base. Thank you.